Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Chelsea Ryan. I'm the Director of Clinical Operations and Pharmacovigilance with PROMETRIKA. We're hosting this webinar today for companies who already prefer small CROs. This is a model that allows our sponsors to continue working with small CROs on global trials. We'll discuss the power of global partnerships between like-minded and like-sized CROs. This synergy is especially vital in rare disease research, where every single patient is a needle in the haystack and standard processes often fail to meet the unique needs of rare disease. By uniting local experts who share the same values and scale, we ensure your global trials benefit from senior level leadership and regional nuances without the corporate red tape. Today, we'll explore how these types of partnerships provide the specialized care and creative problem solving required to bring life-changing therapies to patients worldwide. I'd like to now ask each of our panel guests to introduce themselves and their companies. I'll start with Andy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I am Andreas, the CEO of GCP Service International. We have been working here in Europe on clinical research since 2004, so just under 22 years as of today, with medical devices and drugs, and in a lot of international projects as well. And for that reason, I'm also very much interested in a global collaborative model, because this is how we can make those trials really work well. And I really look forward to our discussion today. I myself started here as a statistician before I moved into the management 4 years ago, almost a decade in clinical research now, and very much look forward to our conversation today.
Thank you so much, Andy. I'll move on to Noga.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noga Brunicki. I'm the founder and CEO at Nova Trials, which is an Israeli-based CRO company established in 2009. We are located in the center of Israel in the Weizmann Science Park, and we are a boutique CRO. We support both biotech and pharmaceutical companies in conducting their clinical trials, mostly locally, of course, but also as part of global programs. We are a full-service CRO, which means that we provide full A to Z end-to-end clinical trial services. And what we do is essentially helping sponsors navigate the Israeli landscape efficiently and compliantly. Regarding our experience, we have extensive experience performing various clinical trials, either from drug studies to medical devices, or sometimes even combination drug-device studies, advanced therapies. We have solid experience with cell therapies, genetics, and of course, observational clinical trials. And lastly, I will just mention that we have a proven record of audits, including successful FDA inspection. And thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Meganus.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meganus Stepanians. I'm the president, CEO, and founder of PROMETRIKA. PROMETRIKA is a small to mid-sized CRO in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We were founded in 2003, and we became a full-service CRO, including clinical operations and pharmacovigilance in 2007. We serve a variety of clients, from very small biotechs to very large pharmaceutical companies. But the area that we focus on for most of our activities is support of rare disease trials as well as oncology. Those are the two areas where we conduct most of our business in. It's great to be with all of you this morning, and happy to have our partners here to discuss our method for conducting global clinical trials within partnership structure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So as Meganus mentioned, as we grew in size and took on more rare disease focused work, we recognized that we needed a global scalability plan. We connected with various CRO partners across the globe, just like GCPS and Nova Trials. We've been working together in one way or another for more than a decade, and most recently we worked together on a large-scale study. This webinar will be representative of our global collective experiences And I'd like to just kind of go over the agenda before we dive in. So the agenda will be first walking through common pitfalls, common pain points that people experience in global clinical trials. Then we'll move into our partnership model and how our partnership model addresses those pitfalls and common preconceived notions of small biotechs. And then we'll talk about what that means for our sponsors. We'll round out the conversation talking about specialized attention, trust, and transparency, everything that you've come to expect when working with us. Great. All right. So my first question will be to Meganush. I know that sponsor relationships are so important to you. This has been a true marker of your career. It's been a lighthouse for you throughout your time at PROMETRIKA. And I'd like to kind of talk about how our partnerships and our sponsor and collaborations with our sponsors is so important. And what are some of the things from your perspective when sponsors move into the global trial they're most concerned about? And what are some ways in which we address those concerns through this model?
Thank you so much, Chelsea. So in my work as heading up the PROMETRIKA team, as well as a consulting statistician within the PROMETRIKA structure, I do a lot of the initial consultation for study design, as well as consultation for submission work with our sponsors. But in my conversations with sponsor leadership members, it always comes up that one of the most important aspects for them is to have the same strategic relationship that they have with us preserved when we go from early phase to late phase, to have the same commitments to same teams, similar structures, similar technologies. And the most important aspect that everyone emphasizes is accountability and that trust that as they move from their phase 2 trials to phase 3, especially in rare disease, that they can be assured that the same commitment to them and the same accountability will continue when we bring in our global partners to the table. So for that, it is very important for me to have a relationship that's a strategic, a true, a time-tested relationship with the partner CROs that we work with personally, to know them, to know their teams, and to talk to them occasionally in a structured governance type of a structure. So from my perspective, we fulfill those expectations by having long-term partners, as you see here today, and others that we work with as well. I think that provides, and it should provide, and it does, a lot of comfort level to our sponsor partners.
It's great. There are so many different varying regulatory regimes and requirements as we move from country to country. And you talking about, the expertise of our partners and how important that accountability is. It becomes, I think, a probably nerve-wracking for our sponsors to move to different countries that they're not as familiar with, right? And this makes it even more important for our local experts to be extremely strong and experienced and to support protecting our patient safety and keep us all in compliance. I'd love to hear about Noga and your experiences with how having those local experts can significantly impact the success of a study.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, one of the challenges for small biotech companies who wants to run global clinical trials is indeed navigating varying regulatory regimes across different countries. Each region, of course, has its own rules, its own timelines, its own processes and expectations, which can quickly become complex and time-consuming for sponsors. So that's why using the services of experienced local CRO companies who not only provides the sponsors with nice trackers of timelines and submission process maps, but really understand the local regulatory nuances this is in fact the real game changer. And, it's even more interesting because regulatory regimes don't just vary across countries. They can also change within a single country, but over time. So this is adding another layer of complexity for sponsors to navigate. As a local boutique CRO, we have the advantage of being nimble and highly adaptable. We are not constrained by rigid corporate processes, right? So this allows us to be very quickly adapting and provide practical solutions when that happens. And in fact, I think this is something to flatter the Israeli Ministry of Health. Whenever regulatory updates or new guidelines are expected, the representatives of CROs operating in Israel, along with others in the clinical industry, of course, are giving the opportunity to provide early feedback and help shape the process even before it comes into effect. That's another reason why we can navigate local regulations efficiently on behalf of our sponsors. And lastly, it's interesting to mention that we had several cases where sponsors conducting global clinical trials who had already enrolled global CRO for conducting the study operationally wise, they still approached us to assume the responsibility for all the local regulatory submissions throughout the study.
Wow, that's incredible that that level of trust is given to you even in those situations. So we've talked about how the country to country requirements can be confusing. And then there's another common confusion point that we often hear from our sponsors, and that's about local sponsorship, legal representation, and authorization requirements within countries. For PROMETRIKA, most of our sponsors are in the US. So our sponsors are not regularly looking to PROMETRIKA for local sponsorship, and that's not something that we specialize in. However, I do know that, Andy, this is something that does come up regularly in the EU and something that GCPS handles often. So can you talk to us a bit about that and how it's easier for a smaller CRO maybe to specialize in this service?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, if we look at the countries that we cover, we are covering 3 legal zones because after Brexit, we have UK. We also operate in Switzerland, which is its own thing, and then in Europe. So even just for within the countries that we cover, we do have quite a complexity in there. And so I can understand that if it's a whole new continent that you're moving into from the US to Europe, or what you consider Europe, and then you have individual legal zones and then individual country requirements, it can become quite confusing. And for me, it's simple though, because if I break it down, I have a really nice and qualified team that understands how to run clinical trials in Europe. And as a CEO of the company, it is my job anyway to oversee the risk profile of our team and to oversee the trials that we run here. And so when a client comes to us and says, we need to go to Europe, what are the requirements? It is easy for me enough to say, we can represent you here as well because we have offices in these countries, we have boots on the ground in these countries. So we are happy to be your representative locally because we understand what it takes. We can guide you through the process, and I can realistically assess the risk of the individual studies, and I can make an executive decision to move forward with it. And I think this goes to speak also to Noga's point of nimbleness, of adaptability. If I'm a large mega corporation, the person you're discussing with is not the person that can make the final decision on whether or not the company takes on legal challenges within these countries and takes on legal responsibility. If you talk with us, you will be talking with me. And that means the decision is a very short pathway away from a conversation to a decision as the same person. And I think this is really where the speed comes in. And so for a lot of trials, we are even partially only involved as legal representatives because you need it before you do the submission, and you don't want to have an added 6 to 9 months of conversations whether a large corporation can take on the legal responsibility for the trial in the local country. You can just have a conversation with someone that's more nimble, take it on, even if it's disconnected from the overall trial conduct. And really understanding the nuances of the area you're in helps in making that decision in an easy manner without incurring any risks.
I know I appreciate your team's knowledge and have leaned on them many times and questions from our sponsors. So thank you for sharing that. You talked a lot about timelines there and how important it is to be quick in your timelines, especially about contracting timelines. So Noga, I know for Israel, we've talked quite a bit about import-export vendors and contracting time. And maybe you could share some of your insights in this.
Yeah, indeed, Chelsea. The advantage of local specialist CROs extends beyond regulatory intelligence. It's very similar to how a local knowledgeable partner can also cut through administrative red tape when working, for example, with import-export vendors. As a local partner, we get direct access to the key players in the clinical supply chain. For example, warehouses, customs brokers, courier companies, and more. But it's not just about the contacts. We also know which steps are prerequisites for the next phase and which tasks can be done in parallel, for example, versus sequentially. This insight keeps the process smooth and avoids unnecessary delays. But one other aspect about vendors management is cost transparency. Because local CROs knows the market well, they can often propose more realistic budget either for laboratories, imaging providers, logistic company, and other service vendors. Therefore, we help sponsors avoid unexpected costs later in the study. And finally, yes, being in the same time zone and operating within the same business culture usually makes communication with vendors much faster and also smoother.
Thank you. I'm going to kind of move the conversation into recruitment. So in my role as head of ClinOps, this is a huge part of my job, recruitment and developing our recruitment strategy for each of our studies. And recruitment can become quite complex when we talk about global clinical trials, and especially when we talk about rare disease. We need to think about the patient journey. So anytime we get a new study, I'm thinking about how did the patient get to where they are when we want to consent them in the study, and what led them to that time period. So that can change when you look at different countries, the different types of providers that are within countries, the different types of specialists within countries. The standard of care can vary. So you can't have a one-size-fits-all strategy for every single country that you're running your study for. And so maybe we can talk about Israel, where Israel is, it's a smaller country. You have a lot of really unique, close relationships that can influence how recruitment is done. And that's different than when we look to recruit a study in the US and there's so many different states and so many different investigators, and not one person could possibly know every single one.
Yeah, that's a great question, Chelsea. One unique aspect of conducting rare disease studies in Israel is the country's relatively small size and the very interconnected medical community. So because Israel is geographically small, physicians across different hospitals often know each other personally, and they do collaborate quite closely. In the rare disease space in particular, patients are often followed by a small number of specialists or key opinion leaders who are well connected with each other. So this means that once a study becomes known within that professional network, awareness can spread relatively quickly. Physicians may refer patients to a study site, even if those patients are treated at a different hospital, simply because they know the investigator or trust the expertise of that center. So yeah, while recruitment in rare disease studies is always challenging, the close relationships within the Israeli healthcare system can sometimes help facilitate both patient identification and, of course, referral. But generally, local CROs like myself and my partners here also have the advantage of maintaining close relationships with local advocacy groups, such as parents' associations for rare diseases. In fact, Mignesh, I know that rare disease studies are very close to your heart. Would you like to share a few thoughts on this topic?
Absolutely. So very similar to your experiences in the U.S., there are centers of excellence, even though U.S. obviously is a lot larger country. but there are those specific centers of excellence that are known for specific rare diseases, and there are medical geneticists within those centers of excellence that tend to have the relationships with the patient communities, relationships with the advocacy groups. So we at ProMetrica make it our business to know those networks, to know those relationships, to cultivate relationships with them, and to collaborate with them throughout the years. One of the aspects that for me, in my own work within the company, has been very instructive is when I've participated in study design and protocol development on behalf of our sponsors, and I've collaborated in those endeavors with patients, parents, and patient advocates who join those teams and bring their expertise live right there, provide the patient perspective. I think that is a great aspect of rare disease that I don't see it in more non-rare indications. And it's interesting because it's perceived that there is a maybe inherent conflict between the study design needs that the statistician, for example, myself, brings to the table, and the CRO expectations for GCP appropriate conduct of the trial that Chelsea brings to the table, along versus the needs and expectations of the patients and their families. I think it's a conflict that, yes, there is truth to it. There is some aspects that need to be negotiated, but through those meetings and conversations and understanding each other's perspectives, a lot of it gets incorporated properly for both expectations within a given protocol.
So much of what you just brought up is one of my favorite parts of working in rare disease research. We get to talk to patient advocates. We get to, at times, actually talk directly to patients, and it brings us closer to why we're all doing this research. And it's a true passion of mine. I think that sometimes when we're in clinical research, depending on the indication, it can become, we're in the background and we're doing the administrative things, and people don't actually get to know the CRO very well other than as monitors. But the amount of work and time that our sponsors and us as collaborators put into a study, we're here for the patients. And it's nice in rare disease research that the patients are so much the focus of the research that we do. I think it's something that, all indications could take as a lesson to enhance the work that we do and bring us closer to the patients at the end of the day. Andy, I know in the EU, regulations have started to really have a patient focus to them. We think about GDPR has always been such a patient focus, and it is really, really rigid and very wonderful for the EU and the patients there. Can you talk a bit about the EMA and different regulations that the EU has put into place to push people closer to that patient-centric view?
Yeah, I think a lot of people in Europe will have a very particular opinion on GDPR and data protection. The general consensus is great that you empower the individual and you say it's your data, it's your rights, and no one else should have an easy way of dictating how we should handle that. I think in actuality, we make it very difficult for ourselves, for people who are willing to donate their data, and all of our brave patients that join our clinical trials and undergo, at the end of the day, experiments. And for the advancements of science, they do that and they're willing to do it. And sometimes we make it really hard for them. So I also feel there can be a balance, but that's a whole probably webinar series on its own, just GDPR. And nevertheless, it does show how important the individual is also. And also in Europe, definitely patient centricity has fortunately really been pushed forward. Actually, it has only been at the end of January that comments have been closing for a position paper of the EMA on patient-reported outcome in clinical trials. So it goes to show that there is still dynamic and there is still movement, and we are anticipating more. And that position paper very clearly states that from the start to the end, patient and patient-reported outcome should be included as part of your development journey. So we have seen it in the US. The FDA is also a strong proponent of it. We also see it in Europe, that really this is moving forward. And even if you go and have a scientific advice, there is a high chance that a patient representative will provide input to guide how the EMA reflects on your protocol, on the development that you want, on what is important for your indication. I think that's great, because this is a perspective we do need. You're not forced into scientific advice, but if you want to approach it in a very structured manner, giving a voice to patients, to patient advocates, that's awesome. And we have a great and developing system in Europe in place to make it happen. And this is something that we're pushing forward. And yeah, you mentioned it earlier, Chelsea, patient journey is so pivotal. And I think sponsors should really look at it also from the positive it can do for them, because patient enrollment is still to date the most challenging piece of every clinical trial. And acknowledging and first understanding the patient journey is a key to solving this and making sure that actually you can find patient and it's not an unnecessary burden for them, and you do get them on board early. So I think we're moving overall in the right direction, and also the European Union and wider area here is pushing this forward.
Thank you so much. I totally agree with you that we are moving in the right direction. The FDA has had similar, community open events where patients can come in and comment on indications, give feedback on their indication. Caregivers can do the same, which I think is wonderful. And I think you make a good point that, involving the patients in this process is good for the sponsors. At the end of the day, if they are so lucky to get to marketed approval, they're going to need to make sure that this is meeting the patient's needs and that the patients are happy with the product that they receive. And getting that feedback early is in my opinion, a great investment, both of time and of funds. So we'll move on to explaining our partnership model. We've talked a lot about, how different things that we see right now for trends across the globe, and different ways in which our partners can benefit our sponsors by working within our partnership. But we haven't really given much information about the operational structure of our partnership. So this partnership model is the partner that brings the project to the team is considered the global CRO. They're the lead CRO and the real touch point for the sponsor. And the sponsor can still have access to talk directly to people in Israel or people in the EU. And that's really important to us because we want to make sure you can talk to those local experts, but it's also important that you have a single point of contact to get your information so it's not confusing to you. But when we bring together multiple companies, there's obviously some things that we need to think about to make sure that is a seamless transition of integration. So we harmonize our training curriculums across our projects. We audit one another. This, I think, is really great. We do audit one another on a regular basis, making sure that just like with any other partnership, other vendor, we don't really think of each other as vendors, but that they're qualified, that they're experienced and able to do this work, and moving with the regulations, like Noga said, as regulations change, our ways of doing things need to change with them. We have established contracts with one another. We also celebrate our longevity of our team. So something that's really interesting within this model is each of these partners have teams that have been there for a very long time. They're very stable teams. And that's a huge win for our sponsors. You're not seeing changes in resourcing, similar to what if you work with PROMETRIKA, you see the same people. We don't change very often. And you're going to get that same thing with our partners. We also have centralized technology. So we have the EDC, the RTSM, ePro, eTMF, CTMS, all the letters of the alphabet, PV tools. Everybody's using the same tools within the partnership, which helps because we're working through different time zones. We're working through people with different language preferences, and it puts everything in one place centralized so that global CRO can get the most up-to-date information at any given time. We're also very flexible. So, we'll sometimes have sponsors come to us, and this is even beyond when we're working just in the US, but also when we go to the global stage. We're very flexible. If a sponsor comes and they say, no, we prefer this eTMF, or we have this RTSM tool that we want to use, we can adapt and work with that. Many of us, I would say, across all of our partner members, we all have experience in every tool there is. So somebody within our team has experience. Great. I will move to Meganus. So now I want to just discuss, just like with our sponsors and third-party vendors, we believe in partnership, and any good partnership, there's good communication and strategic alignment is critical. So each of our companies are, strong individually, and we all have our own goals as individual companies and strategic visions and what we want for our company. And I know that you do for PROMETRIKA. However, just like whenever you have any partnership, you also need to make sure that you're aligned between the companies that you're working with. We do this with our sponsors. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how our meeting structure works within these CRO to CRO partnerships.
Yes. So, the most important thing is to keep talking, communicating. And as our journeys in parallel progress as separate companies, we come across different challenges, different opportunities, and it's at least my intention, and I know my partners have the same intention with PROMETRIKA, is to share experiences, to share learnings from what each of us has encountered, and to do this again within a structure of meetings where, to the extent possible, when we can meet face to face, and in between, meet via technology, like the technology today that's enabling this webinar. The important thing is that intent to communicate and to share information and to share learnings as we go along our journeys, for sure.
That reminds me of our sponsor relationships and how our US-based sponsors want to make sure that they're getting that same level of attention and trust and everything that they've come to expect from PROMETRIKA when they move to the global stage. Noka, in your experience with Israeli-based sponsors, what are their expectations? Are they similar or different in how we interact with, how you're interacting with your partners and how they interact with us?
Yeah. So it's really interesting to note something about the cultural differences between our regions when it comes to sponsor expectations. In the US and EU, for example, to the best of my experience, sponsors usually expect the CRO indeed to provide clear and well-defined processes, but they allow the CRO to guide them smoothly from one point to the next. In Israel, it's a bit different. Sponsors often want to be super involved. They are checking every detail and following along step by step. Sometimes they want to be even, for example, copied on all site emails and expect that site questions will be answered even on the same day within few hours. So in reality, as you know, investigators and site staff they are extremely busy with clinical duties, so it is not always trivial for them to stop and respond to us. But this is where the close relationships that a local CRO maintains with its sites become very important, because we work with these sites regularly and have established already strong professional relationships. This is the reason we are often able to communicate more efficiently and obtain the necessary information very quickly. And this, of course, helps meet the sponsor's expectation for timely updates, for example. So we need to keep the process moving smoothly, but we also need to keep the sponsors engaged and satisfied. And talking about satisfaction, when we are working within this partnership of CROs, all the CROs within a particular collaboration are accountable to the sponsor, of course, but also to one another. This is another layer of trust and credibility we need to maintain all the time and make sure that our sponsors and our partners are satisfied with our services.
Thank you so much. Andy, can you maybe provide a few examples from your experience in working with sponsors in the EU and their expectations?
I think Noga was quite spot on with, I would say, the average. And again, we're based in Germany, so that again has a very different culture from, let's say, far Eastern Europe or Spain. You will still find quite different ways of communicating. The moment you move into like Greece, I think we are much closer to Israel than we are to Germany. So you will find some differences here. But if I look at my average sponsors, I would agree that generally a proactive and guiding way of communicating with them, keeping the sponsor informed over the important elements, but keeping the ball moving a lot without overloading our clients with information that may not be pivotal is something which is sort of expected. And that's the average client. And then I would say you have the 10% of studies where on the other side, you have a person that really wants to be super involved in all of the processes. And I think this is at the end of the day where even just this collaboration that we have for so many years teaches us a lot as long as we are willing to listen. And we can really understand and appreciate the differences in communication because, as Noga said, we are accountable to one another as well. So innately, we're used to adapting our style of communication to our partners, to the person that's the recipient. And the same should be done, ideally in all cases, by everyone anyway, to our sponsors. And so defining at the beginning of the study how exactly we would like to communicate, at which frequency, where the sponsor should be involved, for us is second nature because we anyway do it in our collaborations. It's not that we are living in our own ecosystem where we know how our colleagues like to communicate and we find it difficult to adjust. No, for us, it's second nature to adjust already to one another, making sure that we deliver the information in the frequency and the format that is most suitable to the recipient and not to us as senders. And I think that is really where this model helps us ensure the communication is always up to par in our projects.
You bring up a great point about making sure that we understand our stakeholders, making sure that we aren't doing a one-size-fits-all approach and just very rigid in the way that we operationalize things and the way that we interact with one another. That's excellent and so important in communication, like you said, to understand your receiver and not just be thinking of yourself and how you like to communicate, but how the other person receives things on their side. It requires flexibility and adaptability. So another thing that I know for you that has required adaptability and flexibility is timelines and supporting faster timelines, like we've talked a little bit about before. But I'd also like to talk about how having those strong communication channels and the established relationships gave you the opportunity to move really quickly in contracting for a COVID trial that you ran. Can you share a bit about that experience?
Glad to, because I think this is, at the end of the day, I felt this was a great example for how this collaboration can truly shine. So a couple years back, let's say half a year into COVID, we were in the preparation of an influenza study and it switched mid-preparation into being a COVID trial because COVID started, 2020. And obviously, there was a scientific rationale to think that the product itself could also be effective against COVID and helping hospitalized patients. And so in the middle of adjusting globally to all of the, let's say, monthly changing regulatory requirements, can you go to hospitals, can't you go to hospitals, how do you submit, what do you do, what's the benefit-risk ratio, we started scaling a protocol and an entire global study to match with the requirements of finding hospitalized COVID patients. And we all probably recall, the hotspots of COVID were locally quite dispersed over time, and it's waves that appeared in Europe, that appeared in the US, that appeared in Middle East, that appeared in Africa, and so these changes we needed to adapt to. And at the end of the day, we had more than 20 countries involved in the study, which we always needed to anticipate where is the next wave of patients going to appear. And at that point, you can't move slow. You really need to move fast. And the key here really was we had established qualified partners, and it's a WhatsApp call to a CEO of that company to say, this is really important. It needs to move fast. What information do you need from us? And how can we make sure that we are getting approval ahead of the next COVID wave in your region? How can we make that possible? And of course, funds are still limited. So you have to be strategic about it. You really have to understand it, and you really need to move fast. And so getting that information, and from a week to another, basically forming the basis of what could be a trial in South America or South Africa or in India, really needed us to move fast, be adept, and also to really trust that locally we would be getting the day-to-day information on standard of care, regulatory requirements, whether or not we can submit, whether there is a priority pathway because this is a COVID-related study. And there our network really shined to be able to move this globally at our scale with our nimbleness and really adapt to the situation over and over and over again throughout the period of that trial, and really be present, be proactive, and support the client in realizing their study and eventually recruiting sufficient patients to come to the end. And I was really proud of what the team achieved. Much more, of course, a team journey than mine. Happy that we had the network to support it and eventually scale it like that. And this wouldn't have been possible without such a partnership model.
A great example. I think that is also just a great example of how our partnership model really gives sponsors the attention of our most senior leaders, our most experienced people, and the people that have the most regulatory experience, to your point that, if you're moving that fast, you need to know what you're doing. There's no room for mistakes. At PROMETRIKA, I know that, we have a team that has worked on our INDs and our BLAs, and they are the same team that has been involved in every single one of those applications since the beginning of the company. So when we say that, we have experience doing this for 25 plus applications and submissions, it means that we have people that have experience as a team, learning together as a team, doing this, learning, improving, over time, learning what's the best strategy for our sponsors. And that's different. When you look at larger CROs, they may have bigger numbers, but that does not mean that the people behind those numbers have those numbers. It means that you might be getting somebody that has only ever done this a handful of times. And you don't want, I wouldn't think, that this is the time to roll your dice and hope that you get the A team. The A team, you're going to get it with our teams every single time. There's no question, because we're smaller purposefully, but made of really experienced people, that at the end of the day, our core purpose is protecting the project, protecting these patients and their safety, and protecting the compliance, as well as data integrity, which we haven't talked very much about, and can become a bit complicated when we move to different places where data practices can vary. Data collection, data integrity, understanding can vary country to country. So I'd like to pass it back to Meganush, who has such a wealth of knowledge in this area as a PhD statistician and personally involved in hundreds, if not thousands, of studies. I'd love your thoughts on how we continue to have data integrity when we go into the global trials.
Absolutely. So I think with respect to data integrity, one aspect that we have touched upon, but we have not really delved a lot into today, is the technology, and technology as the foundation, as the support for ensuring data integrity and for ensuring data quality. At the end of the day, a high quality database is the final deliverable that we all are aiming for. It's what ensures for a drug that actually works, it supports that drug through the regulatory process seamlessly. And that is so important to our sponsors and to the patients that they serve. So for me, yes, data integrity is very near and dear to my heart. As someone that's worked with data for more than 35 years, right? And as statisticians, at the end of the day, we live or die by the quality of the data that is given to us to analyze, correct? So at PROMETRIKA and with our global teams working in this structure, providing services for global trials, we use a centralized technology model, as you mentioned earlier, that integrates all different tools that are needed to ensure comprehensive data integrity. And I think, again, to us, we see that investing in those technologies, investing in the knowledge of our people, in using those tools, investing in internal technical training to ensure that everyone that enters our company understands the value of the data, understands the goals of data integrity. Those are all pillars of how we get there at the end of the day. And I think in the global model, partnering with partners who are like-minded with us with respect to the importance of the data, with respect to their commitment to data integrity is another key. And that's another aspect that we are aligned with respect to leadership and with respect to our teams that work together. I think, and all of those elements come together to ensure that the data integrity that we're able to deliver to our sponsors in earlier phase trials that are mainly local are able to be replicated in global clinical trials conducted with our partners.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to end with just a couple of quick questions that really touch upon more of the operational, really important things at the end of the day. And the first one is communication. So Noga, how does communication play a part in successfully executing a global trial? Because when we start to think about global trials, we have, local, global, CTMs, CTAs, CRAs, vendors, site sponsors. Then we have the centralized services like the DMs and the statisticians and the database programmers. Add in an IRT, you have another whole group of people. It can quickly become hundreds of people that are communicating. And if we don't do a good job, it can spiral very quickly.
So yeah, in our collaboration, as you mentioned previously, Chelsea, the CRO leading the client relationship, this is the CRO who also leads the global project management. And this is the CRO who assigns the clear focal point of contact for the sponsor. It can be groups of contacts, but mainly led by a focal point of contact. And as you can imagine, this makes the coordination and communication much more intuitive and efficient, as both parties share the same language, the same culture, the same time zone, and sometimes even the same geographical proximity. I know it's specific for Israel, like some of our clients are neighbors. They are located in the same science park area, for example. And this facilitates a lot of communications and meetings. From there, management scales globally. What I mean is that each country having clearly defined teams like CRAs, local PMs, regulatory people, and more, according to the specifications of the study. The sponsor doesn't need to worry about who to contact for questions across different topics or different countries. The focal point ensures information is routed appropriately. And what's especially powerful about this model, and I'm saying this based on my experience with both of you, Meganush and Andy, is the ability to escalate directly to CRO leadership when needed, knowing that senior management will step in to help and resolve critical issues quickly if needed.
Yeah. I think what you bring up is so true, that, we need to make sure that everyone has their role and everybody knows what their role is. And, I think in this model, if we've done a good job, then our sponsors don't, it doesn't need to be a global CRO, because we feel as though we are one, because we are one team working together, and the communication is the same experience to our sponsors in that way. Andy, I have heard that there might be a preconceived notion that the U.S. likes to meet a lot and schedules lots of meetings, and that we really value meetings, which I just like to see you. When we start to work with different countries, to Noga's point earlier, the communication styles can vary. What about the meeting styles and the actual way that we communicate, not just the tone of how we communicate?
I would say it is indeed our perception that the US does like to meet frequently and in various different groups, which at the end of the day is fine. Again, it's about how does the information from the person that has it go to the person that needs it to make a decision. And the most efficient way varies really widely from region to region. And making sure that there's a lot of communication, let's say more so than maybe in other countries on the US side, is one way of making that happen. If you tried the same thing and you are talking with a Japanese partner of yours, and then probably it will not work the same way, because there, after the meeting, you should really provide a very clear summary of the points discussed and agreed to for them to review and in writing comment on also. And that sometimes can simply be a language barrier, that sometimes can be a communication style difference, reaffirmation afterwards. Sometimes you need to push a little bit the boundaries, and that also works much better in person than remotely, to get people to openly say, these are things I do or I don't know. Culturally, you will find large regions of the globe do not simply openly communicate this. And you need, let's say, the social and cultural intelligence to understand those differences and then work around them. And that's really important. And meetings definitely can help make that happen, but sometimes they are not the only structure for it. And I think that's the beauty of understanding that communication is a means of information transformation and finding the best ways to do it. You already highlighted all the tools that we're using, all of us, in our studies, to highlight and easily transfer communication without the need of two people exchanging, but simply to make information available in a structured means centrally. You can have written notes to exchange it. We have plans and trackers to make it happen and provide overview without the need of inventing that communication. And that really helps creating an opportunity for everyone that is, as you said, at times more than 100 people collaborating together, of finding means of having the information they need to act or to proactively point out where we're moving in the wrong direction, especially if there are regional differences. That needs to be available, and we have ample experience in making exactly that happen, because we are very conscious about the communication differences between us. And that's what I really enjoy. And that's why I'm also very fine in saying that, yes, the US is on board, let's have more meetings.
All right. So my last thing that I'd like to touch on is with Meganush. So when I joined PROMETRIKA, one of the things I noticed right away and was so impressed with is how long our people stay at PROMETRIKA. We have people that have been here 5, 10, 15, 20. The full time PROMETRIKA has been in existence. We have original people that started the company with you. And this was incredible to me. I have been on other sides where I've been part of people not being at companies for a long period of time. It can really impact our sponsors. And we see the same thing with Nova Trials, like we said earlier, and GCPS. And retention can be such a big issue. I'm interested in what you focus on as a leader to create such a culture where people want to stay.
I think the biggest thing is respect. It's mutual respect and empathy, understanding what each person needs, their viewpoint, and working with them, meeting them where they are. And then it's to have a path. It's to know where you can go within this culture, within this company. What is your next step? What it is that you can do to accomplish your own personal goals, to get to where you are, where you want to be as a professional. I think that's very important to our younger folks, and it's important to everyone, not just the younger folks. We really emphasize at the company that aspect of giving people opportunities to train cross-functional area, to learn new things and to grow as individuals and as professionals. I think that has been something that I truly believe in as a person, and its application within the company has also had the happy side effect of having a lot of one-on-one loyalties with people who believe in the mission of the company and believe that they are able to grow as professionals in our company. You mentioned we've had great longevity, and it actually extends to before when we started the company. We have a number of people within the company today that have worked together and with myself in our previous company, which was a pharmaceutical. So we tend to like working together and enjoy the collaboration, and we want to continue it. I think it's that simple.
I think that last part is it's so refreshing because you can really get to focus on the work when you're not worried about meeting someone new and trying to figure out their work nuances and trying to figure out your flow. Once you have those relationships, you're off and running, right? You're as a team headed in the same direction. And it reminds me of us with our sponsors. We have lots of sponsors that have repeat business, and every additional project that we do with our sponsors, it's more seamless. It's, we're more working in the same direction because we've gotten to know one another. We're not starting that process again. And I know for Nova Trials and GCPS, it's the same. They have lots of repeat business. And I think it's a testament to how important these relationships are to us, how committed we are to the relationships. And we're not here for the short haul. We're here for the long haul. We're here for everything in between and want to be part of their own strategic growth. So with that, I'm going to say thank you to everyone for joining us to explore how global CRO partnership models of like size and like-minded CROs can be the best solution when executing a global clinical trial, especially within the delicate ecosystem of rare disease. With the right partnerships, and often that can often be the difference between a trial that succeeds and one that stalls. So we invite you to reach out to continue this conversation. And I want to say thank you to our partners and thank you to everyone else for your time today.